It wasn't the dawn that brought the light, but 1,000 hungry eyes reflecting the eternal ice. Elder Bayan, with every wrinkle carved by winter's fury, felt the air freeze not just from the 70 degrees below zero cold, but from the icy dread emanating from the steppe. A primal howl tore through the night, not from one, but from 1,000 bloodthirsty throats, a colossal pack of white wolves descending from the mountains like a phantom avalanche. His heart, which had survived winters that would kill young men, now beat a rhythm of urgency and despair. For the fate of his village, the future of his people, depended solely on the wisdom he held in his bones, and on what he would do before the first ray of sun revealed the impending carnage. Elder Bayan felt the cold bite deeper, not just into his wrinkled skin, but into his soul. His eyes, accustomed to the polar darkness, swept across the desolate landscape. The village, a handful of tents and wooden huts, seemed tiny and fragile beneath the white, silent immensity of the tundra. Inside, he knew, children slept nestled in warm furs, women watched over the flickering fire, and young men, though strong and brave, lacked the ancestral wisdom needed to face a threat of 1,000 predators. Bayan clenched his fists, his skin rough and cracked by age and the biting wind. It wasn't just the reindeer herd at stake. It was the very existence of his people, the flame of life he had sworn to keep burning through generations. He took a deep breath, the icy air burning his lungs with a familiar ache, but bringing with it the scent of snow and, more distantly, the wild, unmistakable odor of wolves. The promise he had made to his ancestors echoed in his mind, a solemn oath to protect his own, no matter the cost. Advanced age weighed on his shoulders, every bone aching with the penetrating dampness and relentless cold. But responsibility was an even heavier burden, preventing him from succumbing to weariness. He knew that brute force would be useless against such overwhelming numbers. 1,000 wolves were not just a pack. They were a force of nature, a living, hungry winter on the move. Bayan turned, his steps slow but determined, towards the main tent where the council gathered. There, the fire crackled, casting dancing shadows over the apprehensive faces of the other elders and the most experienced hunters. Their gazes fixed on him, seeking an answer, a glimmer of hope amidst the despair. He saw the fear in the eyes of his granddaughter, Ayana, who clung to her mother, her small eyes wide with childlike terror. Ayana, with only 7 winters, represented the pure and vulnerable future he defended with every fiber of his being. "We will not fight them with spears and bows," Bayan declared, his voice hoarse but firm, filling the heavy silence of the tent. A murmur of confusion and surprise rippled through the group. How not to fight? It was the only way they knew to face danger. Their strength is in numbers. Ours is in wisdom accumulated over centuries. The terrain is our ally, and the howling wind our invisible shield. He knelt with difficulty, picking up a charred branch from the fire and drawing a rudimentary map of the region on the hard, frozen earth. The trembling lines represented the deep ravines, the open and dangerous plains, the frozen rivers. "The wolves will come this way." He indicated a point with the branch. "They expect a direct confrontation, a battle of strength, but we will guide them." His eyes, now shining with renewed intensity and iron determination, swept over the faces before him. "We will guide the reindeer into the narrow passages, where the ice is treacherous and the wind howls like 1,000 ancestral spirits. There, their unity will break, and their hunger will turn into confusion." The idea seemed madness to some of the younger ones, a gamble too risky for the community's survival. But Bayan's authority was unquestionable, forged in winters of trial and wise decisions. He was the elder, the living link to the past, the guardian of the tundra's secrets. He explained how they would use calculated noise, the dispersed scent of the reindeer, and even the deceptive light of the northern lights to confuse the predators. It would be a dangerous dance between life and death, a strategy that demanded unwavering courage and a deep faith in their interconnectedness with nature. As he spoke, the northern lights began to paint the sky emerald green and deep purple, an ethereal dance of light that seemed to bless or challenge his audacious plan. The ghostly glow illuminated the faces of the villagers, who slowly began to absorb the audacity of the proposal. It was not a cowardly retreat, but an ingenious maneuver, a stratagem forged in the very essence of the Yakutian winter. Bayan felt a pang of hope, a faint warmth spreading through his icy chest. The battle would not be one of brute force, but of cunning, and he, the elder, was ready to play his last card, not for personal glory, but for the precious lives of his people. Ayana, still frightened, looked at her grandfather, and for an instant, the fear in her childlike eyes gave way to a spark of trust. The fate of the village rested in the elder's hands, and he would not fail. Ayana's trust, still fragile like thin spring ice, was a balm to Bayan's weary spirit. He felt his granddaughter's gaze, a light and precious weight, and knew he could not fail. The silence that followed his explanation was not one of disapproval, but of deep reflection. The younger hunters, with their strong muscles and impetuous hearts, exchanged skeptical glances. They were accustomed to direct combat, to bravery displayed with spears and traps. The idea of guiding the wolves, of using the terrain as an invisible weapon, seemed a betrayal of their own strength. It was a challenge not only to their physical courage, but to their identity as warriors of the tundra. One of the hunters, a young man named Kale, who possessed the ardent spirit of a falcon, stepped forward. His dark eyes, though respectful, held a hint of doubt. He clenched his fist, his rough skin against his palm. "Elder Bayan," he began, his voice grave, "our fathers taught us to face danger head-on. How can we trust that nature, which so often challenges us, will be our ally against 1,000 hungry beasts?" Kyle's question echoed the insecurities of many, the fear of abandoning the known for the uncertain. Bayan raised his hand, a gesture that silenced Kale without need for words. "Nature is not our enemy, Kale. She is our teacher. She teaches us the flexibility of the willow against the storm, the patience of the bear waiting for fish. Brute force is like ice that cracks under weight. Wisdom is like snow that accumulates, protecting what lies beneath." He paused, allowing his words to settle, observing each face and expression of apprehension. The wolves come with the certainty of victory. They expect the confrontation they know, and that is where our advantage lies. We will not confront them, but disorient them, break their unity, turn their hunger into confusion and their instinct into panic. His eyes swept over the faces around him, seeking understanding. He saw hesitation in some, persistent fear in others, but also a growing acceptance, a recognition of the truth in his words. Kyle's wife, a woman with a serene gaze and skillful hands with furs, nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on Bayan. She knew that direct combat meant irreparable losses, and life was too precious to be wasted in an unequal confrontation. Her expression conveyed silent approval, a support that Bayan valued deeply. Bayan pointed again to the improvised map. "We will need everyone. The elders, to guide the reindeer with the calm that only years bring, knowing every curve of the terrain like the back of their hands. The younger ones, to open and close the passages, to create distractions with fire and sound, acting with the swiftness of hares. The women, to prepare the shelters and keep the flame of hope burning for when we return, ensuring the home is safe." He looked at Ayana, who now watched with less frightened curiosity, her childlike eyes absorbing the gravity of the moment. "Even the little ones will have their role, staying safe, but with their hearts united with ours, sending their silent strength." Ayana, feeling her grandfather's gaze, squeezed her mother's hand. Fear was still there, but a new feeling, that of belonging to something greater, of being part of a collective effort for survival, began to blossom in her chest. She didn't understand all the details of the plan, but the unwavering determination in Bayan's voice was contagious, a promise that everything would be all right. The decision was made. Not with war cries, but with the solemn quietude of a people uniting before an existential threat. The men and women began to move, discussing details, assigning specific tasks. The air in the tent, previously heavy with apprehension, now vibrated with focused energy, a shared purpose. Bayan watched them, a pang of pride warming his icy chest. They were his people, his family, and together they would face the living winter that approached. The night was still young, and the northern lights outside continued their silent dance, a premonition that the time to act had come. He knew the journey would be arduous, full of unexpected dangers, but faith in his community and in ancestral wisdom was the compass that would guide them through the darkness. The quiet resolve that filled the tent transformed into a hum of contained activity. Ayana, still holding her mother's hand, watched as the men and women rose, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight and the emerald glow filtering through the tent's seams. Fear had not completely vanished, but it had been replaced by a silent determination, a commitment forged in necessity. Kyle, the young hunter, though still with a hint of apprehension in his eyes, was the first to approach Bayan. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "Elder, tell us what we need to do. We are ready." His voice, previously laden with doubt, now resonated with newfound firmness, echoing the collective acceptance. Bayan nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile appearing on his cold, cracked lips. "Kyle, you and the most agile hunters will be the vanguard. We need you to guide the reindeer out of the village towards the Howling Wind Gorge. Use the ice bells and torches to create a trail of sound and light that attracts them, but doesn't frighten them." He gestured to the map on the ground, pointing to the winding routes he had traced with the charred branch. "The wolves will follow the easiest trail, the scent of the reindeer. We must be more cunning than they expect, using the environment itself to our advantage." As Bayan gave detailed instructions to the hunters, Ayana slipped away from her mother and approached her grandfather. She touched the sleeve of his fur parka, her large, curious eyes fixed on him. "Grandfather, what can I do to help?" Bayan knelt with a soft groan, his knees protesting the effort, and took Ayana's small hands in his. "You, my little ice flower, will have the most important task of all. You will stay with your mother and the other women, helping to keep the fire burning in the main tent. Its warmth and light will be a beacon for us, a promise that we will have a safe home to return to. And, above all, you will keep hope in your heart, for hope is the strongest flame that never goes out, even in the harshest winter." Ayana squeezed her grandfather's hands, feeling the roughness of his skin and the comforting warmth that emanated from him. A sense of importance washed over her, a purpose that made her feel an essential part of the plan. She wasn't just waiting. She was actively contributing, keeping the vital flame of hope alive for everyone. Her fear lessened a little more, replaced by a sense of responsibility and belonging. Outside, the wind began to howl more fiercely, a ghostly chorus that seemed to salute Bayan's audacious plan. The elder rose with difficulty, his eyes sweeping over the faces of his people. He saw the determination in their eyes, the unity in their gestures as they picked up their warmest furs, their torches, and the bells made of bone and ice. The women began to prepare bundles of food and hot drinks for the long night ahead, while the elders checked the sleds and reindeer harnesses, each taking their part with seriousness. Bayan felt a tightening in his chest, a mix of pride and deep anxiety for the journey that was beginning. The responsibility was immense, but the sight of his people acting in unison, each with their task, was a testament to the resilience he so often preached. He knew the journey would be long and dangerous, that the treacherous ice and biting wind would be as much enemies as the hungry wolves. But they were not alone. They were one, a family forged by the cold and the unwavering will to survive. He gave a last look at Ayana, who was now helping her mother roll up a fur blanket, her small fingers agile. Their eyes met, and Bayan offered an encouraging smile, a gesture that sought to convey all his faith and trust. The girl returned a shy smile, but one full of new courage, a glimmer of hope in her childlike eyes. It was for her, for every child, for every precious life in the village, that he would do the impossible. The northern lights outside intensified their glow, painting the sky with vibrant colors that seemed to dance in premonition, a grand and silent spectacle. The time to act had come. Elder Bayan, with the wisdom of 1,000 winters in his heart and the resilience of his people in his soul, was ready to guide his people through the icy darkness towards the promise of a new and safe dawn. Elder Bayan, with the weight of centuries of wisdom and the urgency of the moment in every step, emerged from the main tent. The icy air bit his face, but he barely felt it. His eyes, accustomed to the dim light, swept across the village. The northern lights danced in the sky, casting ghostly lights over the hurried figures, moving in almost reverent silence. The hunters, led by Kyle, were already with the reindeer herd, which, restless, puffed clouds of vapor into the frozen air. The ice bells tied to their staffs tinkled softly, an ethereal sound mingling with the distant howl of the wind. Kyle, his face contorted with concentration, checked the sled harnesses to block the passages. He felt the cold penetrate his boots, but adrenaline kept his body warm. The elder's plan still seemed risky, a gamble against wild nature, but Bayan's confidence was a silent force that propelled him. He looked at the elder, who was now approaching, and nodded, a gesture of respect and readiness. "We are ready, elder." His voice was low, almost a whisper against the wind. Bayan touched Kyle's shoulder, a gesture of support that conveyed more than words. "Remember, Kyle, haste is the enemy of precision. Guide the reindeer calmly, with the rhythm the tundra demands. Do not force them, but lead them. They will sense our intention." He pointed to the gorge opening in the distance, a dark fissure in the white immensity. "The howling wind gorge awaits us. There the wolves' strength will be divided against the ice and rock." Ayana, from the main tent, watched the activity. The fire inside crackled, and the warmth emanating from it was a comfort. She saw her grandfather, a small but imposing figure, disappear into the darkness of the polar night, followed by the men and the reindeer. Her heart still beat a rapid rhythm, but her grandfather's promise that hope was the strongest flame echoed in her mind. She clutched the fur blanket she had helped roll up, feeling the weight of her task. The first faint bluish rays of light began to tint the horizon. The wolf pack, which until then had seemed a distant shadow, began to materialize, their eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. The howl, previously distant, was now an icy, chilling chorus, a warning of their approach. Bayan felt a shiver run down his spine, but it was not from fear, but from renewed determination. The time for the maneuver had come. With a nod, Bayan gave the signal. Kyle and the hunters began to move the reindeer, using ice bells and torches to create a path of light and sound. The reindeer, accustomed to human presence, followed, their hooves softly tapping the snow, raising small clouds of icy dust. The herd stretched like a living river, winding across the tundra towards the gorge. Bayan, with slow but firm steps, followed behind, his eyes fixed on the approaching pack, calculating every movement, every breath of wind. The plan was a delicate dance with danger. The idea was not to outrun the wolves, but to guide them to where their strength would become their weakness. The howling wind gorge was known for its treacherous air currents and thin, slippery ice, a natural labyrinth few knew as well as Bayan. He felt the wind whip his face, bringing with it the acrid scent of the wolves, now closer, more intense. Ayana, still in the village, heard the wolves' howl intensify, a blood-curdling sound. She hugged her mother, but her eyes were fixed in the direction where her grandfather and the others had departed. The flame of hope in her chest flickered for an instant, but she remembered Bayan's words. She let go of her mother and went to the fire, adding a small stick, watching the flames dance. It was a simple act, but full of meaning. Bayan, feeling the increasing pressure, realized the wolves were accelerating. They had noticed the movement of the reindeer, and the hunt was beginning. "Faster, but with control!" he shouted, his voice hoarse but laden with authority. The hunters responded, increasing their pace, keeping the reindeer in a cohesive line. The gorge was in sight, its entrance looking like a hungry mouth in the landscape. The northern lights shone with an almost supernatural intensity, illuminating the scene with a cold and dramatic splendor. Life and death danced beneath its colors, and Bayan knew that every second, every decision was crucial. The battle of cunning against brute force was about to reach its most tense point. Bayan felt his heart pound in his chest, not from fear, but from the almost palpable intensity of the moment. The howling wind gorge, with its steep walls and narrow passages, swallowed the reindeer one by one, guided with precision by the hunters. The tinkling of the ice bells tied to their staffs and the intermittent glow of the torches formed a mesmerizing trail, an irresistible invitation for the approaching predators. The wolves, now a grey and white mass, advanced with terrifying speed, their howls transforming into low, guttural growls. Their hungry eyes fixed on the herd, the promise of food so close they could almost taste it. Bayan observed every detail, calculating the time, the distance, the direction of the wind that began to blow with more fury, raising curtains of fine snow that obscured and revealed the landscape in flashes. Kyle, at the vanguard, felt the biting wind whip his exposed skin. His muscles ached from the continuous effort of keeping the reindeer in formation, gently pushing them into the gorge's narrower crevices. The ice beneath his feet cracked with an ominous sound, making him hold his breath with every step. He could feel the warm breath of the wolves, the wild scent, the raw and relentless energy of the pack pursuing them. But Bayan's words echoed in his mind, a silent mantra. Nature is our teacher. He trusted the elders' wisdom, the promise that the terrain would be their most powerful ally. With a muffled shout, he and the other hunters used their staffs to direct the reindeer into an even tighter crevice, where the ice was visibly more treacherous and slippery. In the main tent, Ayana heard the crescendo of the wolves' howls, which now seemed closer and more menacing. Her mother hugged her tightly, but the girl slipped away, her eyes fixed on the fire crackling in the center of the tent. The flame danced, casting shimmering shadows on the fur walls. She remembered Bayan, his firm voice full of hope, his warm and comforting hands. With a small sigh of courage, she picked up another stick and carefully placed it among the embers, watching the spark jump and the wood crackle with a soft sound. It was her duty, her small but essential contribution to everyone's survival. Hope could not be extinguished, not now. The first wolves, the boldest and hungriest, tried to flank the herd, running along the edges of the gorge in search of an opening. But there, the ice was treacherous, covered by a thin layer of snow that hid deep crevices and slippery surfaces. One of the wolves slipped awkwardly, howling in frustration as it fell sideways, losing its balance for a precious instant. Others followed, their hunting unit, once so cohesive, beginning to break under the unpredictability of the terrain. The speed that was their greatest strength now became a risk. Bayan saw the disorientation in the wolves' eyes, the confusion in their movements. "Now!" he shouted, his hoarse voice lost in the howling wind, but his eyes conveying urgency to the hunters. It was time to activate the next phase of the plan. The hunters, meticulously following the plan, began to light small fires at strategic points, releasing dense smoke and the acrid smell of burning wood that mingled with the scent of the reindeer. The sound of the ice bells intensified, creating a cacophony that further confused the predators. The northern lights, like a silent and majestic witness, cast its green and purple rays, transforming the scene into an ethereal spectacle of light and shadow, where human cunning and animal ferocity confronted each other in a dangerous dance. The pack, accustomed to open-field hunting, was being cornered and disorganized by the landscape itself, its formation broken, its predatory instincts challenged by the elders' intelligence and deep connection with nature. Bayan felt a thrill of triumph, mixed with anxiety, but knew that danger was still imminent. The trap was set, but success depended on every subsequent step, every breath of wind, every crack of ice. Elder Bayan, his skin wrinkled by time and eagle eyes scrutinizing the darkness, felt the tension in the air. He did not hear the wolves howl, for the world of sound had silenced for him many winters ago. Instead, he felt the vibrations through the soles of his fur boots, the subtle tremor of the ice beneath his feet, the resonance of the earth that spoke a silent and powerful language. He felt the confusion of the pack, the disorganized movement of the wolves' heavy bodies as they slipped and struggled in the treacherous crevices of the gorge. A thrill of hope ran through his body, but a strange sensation, a deeper and more irregular vibration, began to trouble him. It was not the frantic predatory rhythm of the wolves. It was something heavier, slower, but with an underlying force that made the ice groan in a different way. Kale, at the vanguard, watched the wolves with a mix of relief and caution. The fires and ice bells were working, breaking the pack's unity. But then a distant rumble, like a block of ice breaking, made the ground tremble. He looked back at Elder Bayan, who stood still, his head slightly tilted, as if sensing something Kale could not hear. His eyes, previously fixed on the wolves, now widened in an expression of sudden apprehension. Kyle felt a chill that did not come from the cold. In the tent, Ayana, who had just added another stick to the fire, felt the intense vibration in the ground. The wooden bowls on the reindeer hide trembled, and a small tremor ran through the tent walls. She looked at her mother, who also felt the tremor, their eyes meeting in a silence laden with questions. The wolves' howl, which previously seemed the peak of danger, now sounded distant and almost insignificant compared to that new and powerful resonance. Elder Bayan raised his hand, a gesture Kyle understood immediately. The plan against the wolves needed to be paused. The new vibration was unmistakable, the dull thud of heavy paws, much larger than those of wolves, hitting the ice. They were bears, polar bears, and many of them. The wolf pack, which previously seemed an overwhelming threat, now dispersed in panic, not because of the trap, but due to the arrival of even more formidable predators. The elder felt the urgency in his chest. It was no longer a matter of scaring them away. It was a matter of protecting, of diverting attention, of guiding. Suddenly, a massive figure, white as freshly fallen snow, emerged from the icy mist, followed by others. A horde of polar bears, hungry and disoriented by the same storm that had brought the wolves, had been attracted by the scent of the reindeer and the commotion. But they weren't just predators. Bayan felt a different vibration, an urgency coming from the heart of the horde. He realized that a group of cubs, small and vulnerable, were trapped in an ice crevice that had recently opened, separating them from their mothers. The wolf pack, approaching the crevice, now posed a threat to the cubs, and the mother bears, in their desperation, were ready to attack anything in their path, including the reindeer herd and the hunters. The plan had changed drastically. It was no longer about scaring away wolves, but about a delicate intervention to save innocent lives and at the same time protect his people from an even greater animal fury. Elder Bayan, with wisdom that transcends sound, felt the bear's despair, the cub's vulnerability. An unexpected turning point had arrived. The northern lights high above seemed to intensify their glow, as if the sky itself was observing the new and complex dance of survival. Bayan knew that every second was crucial. He had to act, and fast. The lives of the bear cubs and the safety of his village depended on his ability to adapt, his deep connection with nature, and his unwavering courage. His gaze met Kale's. Without words, he gestured with urgency, pointing to the crevice where the cubs were trapped, then to the wolves who, confused, still roamed, and finally to the mother bears, whose fury and despair were palpable in the ice's vibrations. Kyle, with years of experience alongside the elder, read the message in his eyes and the movements of his hands. The threat of the wolves had diminished, but a new and much more dangerous one arose. He saw the urgency in the elder, the unwavering decision to protect the cubs, even if it meant a greater risk for them. "Bears," Kyle whispered, his voice hoarse, his eyes wide. "Cubs trapped. The mothers. They will attack." The elder nodded vigorously, his expression serious. He pointed to the reindeer, indicating they should be moved to a safer area, away from the crevice, but still within the gorge. Then he gestured to the hunters, instructing them to create a distraction, using torches and ice bells to divert the mother bear's attention from the cubs and the village. The idea was not to scare away the bears, but to guide them, to calm their fury, showing them a path to their cubs. Kyle, with a knot in his throat, relayed the new orders to the hunters. Surprise and fear were evident on their faces, but trust in the elder was stronger. They had trained to face wolves, but polar bears were a force of nature of another magnitude. However, Bayan's determination, his resolute quietness, was contagious. They moved, some with hesitation, but all with a sense of duty. As the hunters began to maneuver the reindeer, Bayan approached the crevice, feeling the ice vibrate beneath his feet with the cub's agitation. He knelt, ignoring the biting cold, and placed his wrinkled hand on the icy surface, trying to feel the depth of the crevice, the stability of the ice. The mother bears, furious and disoriented, roared, their eyes fixed on the hunters who were trying to divert their attention. They saw threats everywhere, and the lives of their cubs were paramount. In the main tent, Ayana felt the intensity of the vibrations increase. The ground trembled differently now, heavier, deeper. She approached the fire, adding more wood, watching the flames dance with an almost wild energy. Her mother's face was pale, but she held Ayana firmly, her eyes fixed on the tent's opening, where the northern lights painted the sky with even more vibrant and dramatic colors. Ayana knew that something big and terrible was happening, but the flame in her heart, hope, burned with renewed strength. She remembered her grandfather's words, "Hope is the strongest flame." Bayan, with surprising calm, began to use his staff to test the ice around the crevice. He could not hear, but he could feel the danger, the instability. The original wolf trap plan now transformed into a bridge of salvation for the bear cubs. He needed to open a path, a safe access for the mothers to reach their little ones. And for that, he would need the help of the hunters, their strength and agility. Everyone's lives depended on his ability to transform a threat into an opportunity for connection, to show that human wisdom could coexist with nature's ferocity, even in the most desperate moments. He signaled to Kale, indicating that he and another hunter should approach with ropes and ice hooks. The task was risky, almost suicidal. They would have to descend into the crevice to help the cubs, while the mother bears, in their desperation, might see them as a threat. But there was no other option. The elder, with determination etched into every line of his face, knew that true strength lay not in fighting nature, but in understanding it, and when necessary, in extending a hand or a staff to help. The northern lights continued to dance, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, beauty and hope could emerge. Kyle swallowed hard, but the sight of the elder kneeling so close to danger was a powerful incentive. He called the young hunter YAKUT, a strong and agile lad, but still inexperienced in such extreme situations. YAKUT, his eyes wide with apprehension, but with the courage of one who grew up under Bayan's tutelage, nodded. They grabbed the strongest ropes and sharp ice hooks, their hearts beating in unison with the frantic rhythm of that night. The mother bears, still roaring, began to move towards the crevice, drawn by the scent of their cubs and the presence of the humans. Bayan raised his hand, a calm and firm gesture, as if asking for respect and understanding from the wild animals. He felt the vibration of the crevice, the ice cracking under the pressure of the bear's paws. Kyle and YAKUT approached, each step calculated, each movement slow and deliberate. The northern lights cast a blue-green glow over the scene, illuminating the tension and beauty of that instant. Kyle felt his heart pound in his chest as he approached the crevice, the icy air cutting like blades. The bear's scent, heavy and wild, mingled with the biting cold, a constant reminder of the imminent danger. YAKUT, beside him, trembled slightly, his lips pressed into a thin line, but his eyes were fixed on Elder Bayan, who knelt with an almost supernatural serenity at the edge of the abyss. He gestured to the crevice, then to the ice hooks, indicating the safest point to begin the descent. Where the cracks seemed less deep, Kyle fixed the first hook with a firm, calculated strike, feeling the vibration of the ice beneath his gloved hands. The crevice was deeper than it seemed, a dark and treacherous scar on the pristine white landscape. Down below, he could distinguish the small white forms of the cubs, huddled together, visibly trembling from cold and an ancestral fear. The mother bears, with their guttural roars echoing through the gorge, began to approach the edge, their heavy steps making the ice groan and crack alarmingly. Bayan raised his staff, not in threat, but as a reference point, an invisible boundary that seemed to somewhat calm the animals' instinctive fury. He could not hear them, but he felt the intensity of their anguish, the vibration of their maternal despair through the ice that was his language. Kyle tied the strongest rope around his waist, and with a deep sigh that turned into a cloud of vapor, began to descend, testing each foothold, each protrusion with the tip of his boot. YAKUT followed him, his movements more hesitant but equally determined, courage overcoming fear with every meter. With every meter they descended, the cold seemed to intensify, and the air grew denser, laden with the scent of ancient ice and the animal fear emanating from the cubs. The small bears, seeing them approach, emitted small frightened whimpers, and the mother bears on the surface roared with new intensity, their bodies tense, ready to attack anything that threatened their little ones. Bayan, his eyes fixed on the hunters and the bears, began to move slowly, using his staff to tap the ice in a soft, constant rhythm. It was a silent melody, an attempt at communication, to calm the wild spirits, to show that they were not enemies. The mother bears, confused, paused for an instant, their gazes divided between the humans descending and the elder who emitted those strange, almost hypnotic vibrations. In the tent, Ayana, her eyes wide with apprehension, watched her mother press her hands against her chest, a silent prayer on her lips. The girl felt the earth tremble, but now there was a new cadence, a rhythm that, despite being frightening, seemed to carry a strange promise of hope. She clutched her small reindeer effigy, an amulet her grandfather Bayan had carved for her with such care. "They will make it, Mama," she whispered, more to herself than to her mother, her voice trembling but laden with unwavering childlike faith. Her mother merely nodded, a knot in her throat, but Ayana's gaze, so full of hope, was a balm to her own apprehension, a small flame amidst the darkness. Down in the crevice, Kyle finally reached the bottom, his feet sinking into the accumulated snow. He knelt near the cubs, extending his hands slowly, palm up, a universal gesture of peace. The small bears recoiled, but one of them, the smallest and weakest, raised its head and let out a faint whimper, almost a lament. Yarik beside Kale began to tie a thinner rope around one of the cubs. With the delicacy of one handling a fragile and precious treasure, the mother bears above them let out a roar that made the ice vibrate dangerously, but Bayan raised his staff again, tapping the ice with more force and conviction, as if to say, "Trust us. We are here to help. There is no harm." The northern lights high above seemed to pulse with the same intensity as the unfolding drama, an ethereal spectacle of light and shadow, of life and death, of fear and hope. The lives of the cubs and of the entire village hung by a thin thread, but Elder Bayan, with his silent wisdom and courage, was determined to weave a new tapestry of survival and connection. Kale, with the rope firmly tied around his waist, reached out to the nearest cub, a small ball of white fur that trembled uncontrollably. The icy air of the crevice seemed to suck all energy, but he felt the fragile warmth of the small body beneath his gloved fingers. Yarik, with the agility of a squirrel, had already tied the thinner rope around another cub, with a care that contrasted with the urgency of the situation. The whimpers of the small bears, though muffled by the depth, reverberated in Kyle's heart, a melody of fear and helplessness. The mother bears above roared with increasing fury, their massive bodies moving restlessly at the edge of the crevice. Bayan, his eyes fixed on the hunters and the cubs, intensified the rhythm of his staff on the ice. Each tap was a call, a silent promise of help, an invisible bridge between animal fury and human compassion. He felt the instability of the ice, the tension in the mother bears, life hanging by a thread. As Kyle carefully lifted the first cub, feeling its light and fragile weight in his arms, Yarik began to pull the second with the rope, gently guiding it upwards. The ice cracked again, a sharp sound that made Kale hold his breath. The mother bears reacted with a deafening roar, stepping forward. Bayan, however, did not retreat. He raised his staff higher, tapping the ice with renewed force, almost as if dancing with danger, his quietness a fortress against chaos. His eyes, which could not hear, saw the anguish in the bears, and his soul felt the need to show that there was no threat, only aid. In the main tent, Ayana cowered, the vibrations in the ground becoming more intense and erratic. She could feel the fury of the mother bears, the apprehension of the hunters, and above all, the unwavering calm of her grandfather. Her mother, sitting beside her, pressed her lips together, her eyes moist with worry, but there was no despair in her gaze, only a silent faith in Elder Bayan. Ayana squeezed the reindeer effigy, feeling the warmth of the wood against her palm. "He will make it," she repeated, this time with more conviction, as if her words could strengthen Bayan's courage. The glow of the northern lights, through the tent's opening, seemed to pulse in sync with the beats of her small heart. Down in the crevice, Kyle handed the first cub to Yarik, who held it firmly while Kyle prepared for the next. The task was slow and exhausting, each movement a calculated risk. The mother bears, though still agitated, seemed a little more hesitant, Bayan's silent melody seeming to penetrate their fury. They watched, their gazes fixed on the small white bodies slowly ascending. Bayan felt the change in the ice's vibration, a slight decrease in the intensity of the animal rage, replaced by a cautious curiosity. He knew he was reaching them, not with fear, but with mutual understanding. Finally, the last cub was hoisted out of the crevice, trembling but safe. Kyle and Yarik, exhausted but with a gleam of triumph in their eyes, looked at Bayan. He smiled, a soft, warm smile he rarely showed, a smile that spoke of relief and gratitude, but also of a new responsibility. The mother bears, seeing their cubs safe, stopped roaring. They approached slowly, sniffing the air, their eyes meeting Bayan's. There was no more fury, only a silent recognition, a connection forged in ice and despair. The elder extended his hand to one of the cubs, which, still frightened, did not fully retreat, but sniffed the tip of his wrinkled finger. The northern lights exploded in even more vibrant colors, as if celebrating that moment of unity. However, the icy breeze carried with it the distant echo of a solitary howl, a reminder that, although the bear's fury had been calmed, Yakutia still held many challenges. Elderbayan knew that the journey to the village's true peace and safety was far from over, and that every act of compassion wove a stronger thread into the tapestry of life. Elderbayan, with his wisdom that needed no sounds, felt the change in the air, a subtle but unmistakable vibration that intensified. The solitary howl, previously distant, now multiplied, echoing through the gorge like a macabre hunting song. The mother bears, who moments before displayed cautious gratitude, raised their heads, their eyes fixed in the direction from which the howls came, a primal instinct alerting them to a new threat. They moved, positioning themselves protectively over their newly rescued cubs, a massive barrier of fur and wild instinct. Kyle and Yarik, still panting from exhaustion and relief, felt a shiver run down their spines. The sound was unmistakable. The wolves. The pack that had been dispersed, but not defeated, was returning, perhaps drawn by the scent of wounded reindeer or by the bear's own agitation. The promise of an easy meal was an irresistible call in the unforgiving tundra. Kyle looked at Bayan, his eyes questioning, seeking guidance. The elder, his hand still extended towards the bear cub, now nestled near its mother, turned slowly. His face, marked by the lines of age and wisdom, was serious again, serenity replaced by an iron determination. He felt the earth tremble with the pack's approach, a rhythmic and powerful vibration that announced the approaching storm. He gestured to Kyle and Yarik, indicating they should move away from the mother bears and join the other hunters, who were already on alert, their torches raised, their ice bells ready. The village, though still safe, was in the pack's path. Elder Bayan knew that time was short. The original plan for the wolves, which had been adapted for the bears, now needed to be reactivated and refined. The connection with nature, which had saved the cubs, would now be the key to protecting his people. In the main tent, Ayana felt the vibrations change again, more abruptly, more urgently. The ground no longer trembled with the bear's fury, but with a rapid and insistent pulsation, like many hearts beating in unison. Her mother, with a muffled cry, pulled her closer, covering her ears, though Ayana already knew what it meant. The wolves, the flame in Ayana's heart flickered for an instant, fear threatening to engulf her. But then she remembered her grandfather, his calm, his strength. She squeezed the reindeer effigy, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath, trying to feel the hope Bayan radiated. Bayan, with a quick and decisive gesture, pointed to the gorge, to the narrow passage they had used to guide the reindeer. The idea was not to fight the wolves, but to use the terrain to their advantage, channeling the pack into an area where the ice was thinner, more treacherous. He gestured to Kyle, indicating that the reindeer should be moved to this passage, a bait, but a bait that would not be sacrificed. The hunters, with courage renewed by Bayan's leadership, began to move, their torches dancing in the icy air, the ice bells tinkling in a frantic rhythm. The mother bears, with their cubs safe, seemed to understand the urgency and, to everyone's surprise, began to move away. taking their little ones to a more protected area, away from the imminent confrontation. It was as if the elder had established a silent pact, a truce between species. Bayan positioned himself at the entrance of the gorge, his staff raised, his eyes fixed on the darkness from which the howls approached. He felt the vibration of the 1,000 wolves, the hunger in their hearts, the ferocity in their steps, but he also felt the strength of his people, the hope in Ayana, the courage of Kale. He was not alone. The northern lights high above seemed to lean in to observe, its vibrant colors painting a scene of drama and beauty. The climax was upon them, a deadly dance between ancestral wisdom and nature's fury. Bayan took a deep breath, the icy air filling his lungs. He was ready. Bayan, his staff raised like a silent scepter, made a sweeping gesture to Kale and the hunters. His eyes, which felt the earth's vibrations, indicated the narrow path of the gorge, where the natural trap patiently awaited. The reindeer, guided by the hunters with swinging torches and tinkling ice bells, began to move into the passage. The air vibrated with the wolves' approach, a wave of hungry energy that Bayan felt deep in his bones. The earth spoke to him, each tremor a warning, each pulsation a promise of danger. The pack, a white and voracious tide, emerged from the icy darkness, their eyes glowing like embers in the ghostly light of the northern lights. 1,000 wolves, hungry and relentless, advanced with terrible determination. Kyle felt his heart pound in his throat, but Bayan's unwavering calm was his anchor amidst the storm. He and the hunters acted in perfect synchronicity, moving the reindeer with calculated precision, creating an illusion of disordered flight that would attract the predators. The torches swayed in a hypnotic rhythm, the bells tinkled in a frantic chorus, and the calculated shouts of the men echoed through the gorge, guiding the wolves into the narrow passage. Kyle watched the elder, his small and resolute figure ahead, tapping his staff on the ice in a rhythm that seemed to calm the reindeer and, in some subtle way, confuse the wolves. The strategy was not to confront, but to disorient, to break the pack's unity, exploiting their hunting instinct and their greed. The wolves, blinded by hunger and the promise of an easy meal, fell into the trap with blind ferocity. The narrow passage, with its treacherous and uneven ice, was not wide enough for the pack to maintain its cohesive and deadly formation. The ice beneath their feet began to crack and groan, a sharp sound that, though Bayan could not hear, he felt in every fiber of his being, a melody of instability and danger. The front wolves hesitated, their survival instinct battling against ravenous hunger. But the pressure from those behind, the mass of 1,000 hungry bodies, pushed them inexorably forward into the invisible danger. The pack's unity began to fragment, confusion settling in their wild, alert eyes. In the main tent, Ayana felt the climax of the battle through the ground. The vibrations were chaotic, a whirlwind of cracks, groans, and the wolves' rapid, disordered pulsation. Her mother hugged her tightly, her eyes closed in a silent prayer, her lips moving soundlessly. The flame of hope in Ayana's heart trembled for an instant, fear threatening to engulf her. But then she clutched the reindeer effigy, imagining her grandfather, strong and unwavering, facing the darkness with the wisdom of centuries. "He is succeeding," Ayana whispered, her voice choked with emotion, but laden with a certainty that transcended childlike fear. She could feel Bayan's wisdom and his deep connection with the earth. The ice, under the pressure of their bodies and the calculated rhythm of Bayan's staff, gave way at strategic points, not in large cracks, but in small fractures that unbalanced them, breaking the frantic rhythm of the hunt. The wolves, who relied on unity and speed to dominate, found themselves trapped in a labyrinth of unstable and unpredictable ice. The hunting howl, once menacing, transformed into whimpers of frustration and fear. The pack, which was once an unstoppable force, was disoriented, its members colliding with each other. Bayan, with a final and powerful tap of his staff on the ice, sent a final vibration. That territory would not be theirs. The wolves, their unity broken, retreated into the icy depths of the tundra. The silence that followed was almost deafening, broken only by the whisper of the howling wind and the distant sound of the retreating wolves. Kale and the hunters watched the pack disappear into the darkness, a collective sigh of relief escaping their tense lips. The reindeer, though agitated, were safe. Bayan, his shoulders relaxed and head held high, lowered his staff. A soft, tired smile, yet overflowing with triumph, illuminated his wrinkled face. He had proven that true strength lay not in brutality, but in intelligence, patience, and a deep connection with the world. The village was safe, the herd saved, and ancestral wisdom ensured the survival of his people. The northern lights, high above, danced in celebration, painting the sky with the promise of a new and hopeful dawn. As the first pale rays of the sun tinted the horizon, the village awoke. Ayana, with tear-filled eyes, emerged from the tent with her mother. Running to embrace Bayan, the elder knelt, enveloping his granddaughter in a tight embrace. Ayana said nothing, but her eyes, fixed on Bayan's, spoke of deep gratitude and unwavering faith. The hunters, exhausted but with renewed vigor, gathered. Kyle and Yarik approached Bayan, their expressions of respect and admiration evident. Kyle touched the elder's shoulder. "You saved us, Bayan," he said, his voice hoarse. Yarik merely nodded, his eyes shining with the understanding of that man's silent strength. Bayan, feeling the vibration of the words and the warmth of the gestures, merely smiled. He pointed to the reindeer, which grazed peacefully, and then to the sky where the northern lights still danced, as if the victory belonged to everyone, a harmony between humanity and nature. The mother bears had already moved away, leaving tracks in the snow, a reminder of an unusual pact. The entire village gathered to celebrate life. Fires blazed, the scent of hot tea and roasted meat spread, a balm for tired bodies and apprehensive spirits. The children, previously cowering in fear, now played in the snow, their laughter echoing, a sound of hope that Bayan felt deep in his chest. Bayan sat near a bonfire, Ayana nestled beside him, the reindeer effigy in her hand. The elder watched his people, each face illuminated by the fire and the promise of the new day. He knew that Yakutia would always present challenges, that winter would be relentless, and that life would demand constant vigilance and resilience. But on that dawn, with the herd safe and the community united, he felt a deep peace, a certainty that warmed his soul. True strength, he thought, lay not in dominating nature, but in understanding it, in living in balance with its laws, using wisdom, passed down from generation to generation. He had guided his people not with war cries, but with the silent melody of the ice, the dance of the wind, the attentive reading of the earth's vibrations. His silence was not weakness, but a bridge to a deeper and more essential knowledge for life in the tundra. Ayana raised her head, her eyes meeting Bayan's. "Grandfather," she whispered, "you are the strongest of us all." Bayan smiled, a smile that spoke of love and a legacy that stretched into the future. He touched his granddaughter's hand, a gesture that conveyed centuries of wisdom, resilience, and unconditional love. The girl squeezed the reindeer effigy, feeling the connection, the heritage, the strength of her people. The sun rose higher, bathing the icy landscape in a golden glow. The village, once threatened, now pulsed with new life, a testament to the courage, intelligence, and deep human connection that flourished even in the icy depths of Yakutia. Elder Bayan, guardian of traditions, had once again ensured that the flame of his people would never be extinguished, no matter how fierce the winter. The story of his wisdom and altruism would be told for generations, a beacon of hope and inspiration in the vast and ever unforgiving tundra. And indeed, the story of his wisdom and altruism began to be told, not just whispered around bonfires, but etched into the hearts of every villager. In the days that followed the wolves' departure, the air, previously tense, now vibrated with new lightness, a promise of renewal. The celebration of survival was a deep recognition of the unbreakable connection that bound them to the land and to each other. Bayan, sitting in his tent, heard the children's laughter outside, a sound of life that filled him with peace. Ayana, his granddaughter, spent hours by his side, observing every gesture of the elder. The girl asked no questions, but her curious and attentive eyes absorbed Bayan's quietness and strength. Ayana understood without words that true wisdom lay not in shouts, but in deep listening, perceiving the silent messages the world offered. She squeezed the reindeer effigy, now a symbol of her heritage and latent strength. Kyle and Yarik, the hunters who once relied on brute force, now moved with new reverence for nature. They observed the ice with different eyes, feeling its fragility and strength, understanding Bayan's lessons. In their hunts, they used the wisdom of the terrain with more cunning, guiding the animals with respect, not just with the intention to dominate. The elder had shown them that intelligence and patience were the powerful weapons in the tundra. Ayana's mother, sitting with other women, wove new blankets. Her eyes, previously apprehensive, now reflected deep serenity. She spoke of Bayan with silent pride, sharing stories of his youth, of his connection with the land. The village women, inspired by Bayan's courage, organized to strengthen the tents and stock food, preparing for winter with determination. The vulnerability felt had transformed into a collective sense of responsibility and unity. The entire village flourished under the winter sun, which, though weak, brought warmth and hope. Bonfires crackled, conversations flowed, and the community felt more united. Bayan's presence was a beacon, reminding them that even in the most adverse conditions, human resilience and connection with nature would overcome any obstacle. He had planted a seed of trust and altruism that now sprouted in every heart. Bayan, with an almost imperceptible smile, felt the village's pulse, the contained joy, the silent gratitude. He knew that life in Yakutia was an endless cycle of challenges and triumphs, but also of beauty and connection. The threat of the wolves had passed, the bear cubs were safe, and the reindeer herd grazed in peace. His mission, for now, was accomplished. He had ensured not only physical survival, but the preservation of his people's soul, identity, and faith in ancestral wisdom. Ayana, feeling her grandfather's gaze, raised her head and squeezed Bayan's wrinkled hand. A future of hope unfolded, where strength was not measured by voice, but by the depth of the soul, by the capacity to feel, understand, and love. Elder Bayan, guardian of an invaluable legacy, knew that his story would be more than a legend. It would be a guide, a whisper of courage for generations to come, an eternal testament to the resilience that flourishes in vast Yakutia. The northern lights, even absent, still seemed to shine in everyone's eyes, promising that light would always find a way, even in the deepest darkness of winter.